escape. The songs and sights, they're surely thrilling. Dazzle village youths today. A flock to take a Saxon shilling.
Been nervous. Woke up this morning and it was fingers and thumbs. Just pure nerves were at me so well because I knew I was going away today. So I was thinking of what you're leaving behind. The place where I come from, there isn't much for a chap my age. Like everybody says, okay, the Celtic tiger is still roaring, but not in our town.
Travelling north to join up, this young emigrant is leaving behind family and friends to fight for the Queen. Even today, it's a controversial decision. He doesn't want to be identified. A patrol from the Royal Irish Regiment takes off for an operation near the border. These Irish soldiers serve all over the world, but for the next 6 months, they'll be working closer to home on a tour of duty in Northern Ireland. Although part of the British Army, the Royal Irish have men from Cork, Dublin and Limerick keeping the Queen's peace in Ireland. There are at least 300 young men from the Irish Republic serving in British regiments today. Some would say that they've turned their backs on their own country, but these men form part of a hidden tradition which has survived in Ireland for over 2 centuries.
Yeah, basically we're concentrating in this area. It's called an impact. It's a routine VCP. And we've been monitoring the movements of vehicles along this road today. Who are using these roads, and also, you know, any new buildings that are popping up, being built, and signs of disturbance. 2 seconds.
Hey, sorry, how's it going? Just a mail, is it? Just a mail, is it?
Yankee 0, Yankee 2-1, check. Echo Yankee 0, 3837.
Still around here? Busy at all today?
It's getting busy now from now to...
Obviously, when people hear our accents, mixed reaction, like, you know. Some are happy, some give us abuse. I was one time here, like, you know, we stopped the car, like, stopped some bloke, and he wanted to know, obviously he heard my accent, and he wanted to know what the Irish Army was doing so far north, like, you know. He thought we'd invaded the country, you know, but obviously I explained to him, like, you know, I was with the Brits, so... I tried for the Irish Army years ago, and obviously done the interviews, done the medicals, passed all that, and I was told there could be a 3-year waiting list, and I wasn't going to be waiting about. I mean, at the time I was ambitious, I wanted to get somewhere, I wanted to do something with my life.
Originally from Cork, down in the Republic, a place called Mayfield, and this is my 4th tour now. They don't get any easier because obviously the enemy's still there. However, you do learn to adapt a little bit easier. Looking forward to getting home. The countryside isn't that much different. The grass is slightly greener down south, but and the people are certainly friendly down there as well. Basically, I found myself coming full circle. I left down as a young man, a young civilian, and then I came back to what I perceived as Ireland, even though it's Northern Ireland, in a uniform and seen in a different light. You know, because I had the uniform on, I was seen as an occupying force. Some people perceive us as there to help them. And I had a slight bit of an identity crisis. You know, one time I thought to myself, well, am I doing the right thing here? Am I on the right side? Am I persecuting Catholics? I'm a Catholic. That lasted for a while, and then I stopped this suspected terrorist. He said a few things that made me realise that I was on the right side. You know, this was a Catholic from Northern Ireland who was in the IRA, and he didn't care if the enemy, if the person that he killed or organised to kill was a Catholic, was a Protestant. To him, it was just a target, and then that kind of made me realise that I was on the right side, and you know, I wasn't the same as them.
Stiff from a long journey across the north in a sealed van, more soldiers from the Royal Irish arrive in Dungannon. In the past, Irish regiments didn't serve in the north, but recent cutbacks mean that all British soldiers can be sent there now.
I wanted to go to Northern Ireland. If you have any problem with the situation in Northern Ireland, well then I wouldn't have had any business joining the British Army. I thought long and hard about that beforehand, and I was quite happy to go up there. When I finished university, I went into Civvy Street, got a good job in Civvy Street, and I took a look at myself after a couple of years and thought, all I'm working for here is a share price, and I thought there has to be something better than this. To be honest with you, I was quite shocked when I joined the British Army, finding out just how many people from the south of Ireland were in it already. You may even meet people you know from home, and you suddenly realise they're in the British Army and they realise you're in the British Army. It's just one of those things that you can't talk about at home, and that's why you don't hear about it.
There's an awful lot of good Irish people out there that just want to soldier. At the end of the day, they're not too bothered what side they pick up, you know, or, you know, who they fight for. They just want to soldier, that's all.
The military dimension to Irish history has got to be recognised. From earliest times, the Irish have fought, the Irish have proved to be soldiers. And from the 16th century on, Irish men have gone abroad to fight in other people's wars. It had no connotations about loyalty, disloyalty, affection for or dislike for, or fighting for family or home. This was a career. It was what they had been bred into, brought up to. And this is why they went abroad to fight for other countries.
In the Middle East, another Irish regiment, the Irish Guards, are rehearsing for war in the desert. The Mix, as they're known, also draw recruits from both sides of the border and from Irish communities in Britain.
The idea is to follow the route down, not get stuck in the wood.
The desert takes its toll on men and equipment. One vehicle is struggling to keep up.
Well, because we're unsure that the vehicle will make the distance, we'll stop here for the night, bed down here for the night. In the morning, we'll try to move again. If not possible, we'll call out a REME recovery unit, come out, hopefully fix the problem, we get back in before lunch.
Luke, do you reckon we're going to need the REME?
It's a shock to see that I'm in a vehicle that's older than myself. Modern technology. Sand and sun, what more can you want? Oh, a couple of dancing girls will be fine.
Leaving Ireland to become a soldier is in many ways a familiar story of emigration. Young men seeking work abroad when there's none to be found at home.
I'd left school when I was 16. I'd worked on the building sites for a couple of years as an apprentice painter and decorator. But in the mid-80s, the building trade in Ireland basically had fallen flat. My father and grandfather served in the Irish Guards, and I thought, oh, well, I'll give it a go for 3 years. Every year, you know, it came up towards the end of my contract. There's always something further on to go for, another country to go and visit, another promotion perhaps, right? So I just carried on. I used to enjoy playing Gaelic football, but it wasn't so great being an unemployed teenager in Dublin. And at the time, there was not a great deal of work going on in Dublin for young lads. And it wasn't just me who gave up Gaelic football. I think there was, must have been about 40% of the team that I played on also gave up Gaelic football to go to London or America. I just happened to join the army. Other guys went on and done other things.
I'd never actually left the Republic of Ireland before I joined the army, and I'm in just over 4 years now, and in those 4 years this is my 20th country now, young man. Not one of the nicest ones, but the 20th anyway. I was born and grew up in Dublin, a suburb called Ballyfermot, educated at the Christian Brothers schools in the neighbourhood. Had a variety of jobs, from working in warehouses to basically packing plants, stuff like that.
I tried to join the Irish Army, and I was too old at the time because they were only taking school leavers. And a friend of mine just said, well, why not go abroad? And there was a choice basically of the French Foreign Legion or the British Army. They were the two big recruiting things for Irish guys. And I said, I'll give the British Army a crack for us, because the Legion obviously is a much more uncomfortable life.
Well, I buttered me brogues and shook hands with me spade, and away down the road like a dashing young blade, when up comes a sergeant and he asks me to list. At a sergeant a grab, put the bob in me fist, with me to run.
We have to remember that until the end of the 18th century, Irish regiments were in fact banned from the British Army. Irish recruits were prohibited. There was a feeling that Irish recruits would be unreliable, and that in any case it would be most unwise to teach Irish Catholics in particular the use of arms, lest they would put their knowledge to good use when they got back.
Now the first thing they gave me, it was a red coat.
So far as the military command is concerned, the need for recruits overrules all political consideration. This was evident in the 1780s. Recruits were needed. Therefore, if the penal laws, for example, stood in the way of large-scale recruitment, the penal laws had to go. A century of exclusion went within a matter of 20 years, and Irish regiments began to be recruited.
And the next thing they gave me, they called it a gun.
The Irish inflow into the British Army is quite astonishing. From almost 0%, by the 1830s, perhaps 40% of the British Army was Irish. By the 1850s, perhaps 50% of the British Army was Irish. It constitutes, by any standards, a military revolution.
Oh, with me to ran and you and ya.
Oh, Mum. Yeah, I'm just phoning to say that I made this, but I did. Yeah, it's a nice place, really nice place, and I'm staying in, so it is. Yeah. I'll be collected, so I will, tomorrow, and brought to the barracks, where I have to be sworn in. Yeah.
The thing with the young Irish boys leaving Ireland is they make the conscious decision initially to leave home and to try and make their fortune in the future. There is no going back. If you either go back as a success or as a failure, you've left your home, you've left your family behind. In some situations, you can tell your parents that you're going to join the British Army. In some situations, you can't tell anybody. So you become very isolated and very lonely. And the guys that you join up with become essentially your family.
I couldn't tell anybody what I was going away to do. Sometimes you're feeling a bit down, you want to pick up the phone and chat to one of your mates, but you can't tell them why you're down or what you're doing really for a living, so it's quite difficult that way. I would love to be able to talk freely about it, but unfortunately I can't do that, and I have to accept that.
You do become slightly subversive, and you're living in a different skin. For example, when I went home after I joined the army a few years ago, I was still a chef. I was still, I'd bump into a guy down the town who was home on leave at the same time, and it was like you'd look at each other, and we knew exactly where we were coming from. But if we were talking in a circle of friends, he was digging roads in Birmingham, and I was a chef in Derby or a chef in London or what have you. He made it up.
The Southern lads tend to do extremely well, like, you know what I mean, and not just the British Army, but any army, for the simple reason they've left their own country. They know what it is they want in their heart and soul, so they go after it. It's the same for the lads from the north, I'm not too sure about the lads from England. When I look at them, they look at it more like a 9-to-5, Monday to Friday job, because they go home on the weekends. But I mean, it's not the same for the lads from both the north and the south. I mean, they get stuck into it.
I was born in West Belfast, and I remember seeing the Brits, as they were called, who was then running around the streets. And it was quite exciting in those days, because you used to see the Land Rovers flying up and down the street. And these fellas running around with rifles on their backs, dodging in there to houses, running up and down the streets. And you didn't grasp the wider aspects of things, of why people were throwing bricks at the soldiers or why they were shooting them. It just didn't come into it. I was a kid, and it was fun. We started following the patrols around, and I actually remember kids in our street going out with their hurley bats and using them as rifles on their shoulders and going either side of the street and acting like a patrol and copying the soldiers getting up and down the street. I joined the army in '87, and I don't think I've been home to my family home, my home, if you still want to call it that, for a good 14 years now. If I want to see my family, they have to come to England to see me. I can't just turn up in the door and say, how you doing, how's everybody going? And people in my family have died since I've been away, and I haven't been able to go back for funerals and things like that. So you do have to give up a lot. What I do is I look at the bigger picture, and I've got friends who are lying in the cemetery, friends who served time in jail, and if I had stayed where I was, I probably would have ended up in the same situation. I was one of the lucky ones. I got out.
It's ironic that the British Army is one of the few institutions where Protestants and Catholics from each side of the border both live and work together. Within an Irish regiment, like the mix, each soldier is affected by this collision between orange and green.
I'm Protestant, come from a very staunchly loyalist area. Before I joined the mix, I wouldn't even thought of calling myself a Mick. You know, I always thought of Mick as being a Southern Irish, like, I don't need to be derogatory, like a rogue type thing. No, I ain't no Mick. But I've adopted that into my lifestyle, and I'm actually proud to call myself a Mick.
It's a bit alien at first because you do expect kind of, oh, what are these fellas going to be like? We're going to start scrapping now or something. But, I mean, obviously you will get the odd bad egg. I mean, you get that everywhere. But then once you get through all the sort of initial kind of icy atmosphere and you realise, well, there's just other blokes from a similar area to me, similar kind of whatever working class background, and you find that you actually do have a lot in common.
Just can't make out a word they're saying. The weirdest part's the accent.
It's a bit of banter, a bit of slagging goes on, especially around times like the 12th and that. It's definitely a bit of stick flying, but...
You barricade them in their rooms and don't let them out.
Try to make a corridor into the Gavaki Road, but...
You know, I used to get a hiding from all the other lads because it was from the West Belfast. You're very aware of being a Roman Catholic in those days. Battalion wasn't as disinterested as it is today. You were actually, as you walked through camp, you used to get called a Fenian bastard quite regularly. But that's up to you personally, whether you accept that. I personally wouldn't accept it. If somebody called me a Fenian bastard, then they were called an orange bastard straight back. And if it came to blows, which invariably did, then the better man won at the end of the day, no matter what religion you were.
I mean, when I joined up, you know, before that I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of a Fenian or a Teague, and suddenly to be put into a situation where I was working with guys from Northern Ireland, and to be called a Fenian or a Teague, you know, initially I was like, well, who gives you the right to call me, put me in that little box? I broke a fight up one day, and the guy that I stopped goes, "You Fenian fucker." Well, what had that got to do with the fact that he was looking to give this guy a kicking, and I happened to stop it? And a friend of mine came up, well, I say he was a friend, he was a Southern Irish guy, came up and says, "How could you even call you a Fenian fucker and you didn't do anything about it?" I thought, well, if he's that small-minded enough to call me a Fenian fucker, then that's fine. I haven't got an issue with it. And if you want to take issue with it, then you go and you fight with him.
Sectarianism is a reality, but the clash of cultures within these regiments has also created a unique form of Irish identity, rarely glimpsed by outsiders.
Sometimes we have a good laugh over them because some of the songs are truly horrendous. Like, you know, like giving loads about such and such a guy who died or whatever.
In the sun! And the bullets flash, and the rifles flash, and the run of a Thompson gun.
Obviously, there's people that very staunchly believe in that kind of stuff, but to us, it is kind of amusing to think of the job that we're doing, and then we're all in there listening to this kind of stuff.
1, 2, 3, 4.
You'll get guys from the north, from the Shankill going, "Oh, stick on that one about your man Sean South or Gary On or whatever," and you're like, "God, why does he want to listen to this, you know?"
Being honest with you, if you're an Irishman and you come from the Republic, you're very much aware of the history of Britain and Ireland. You're brought up, you know, at school with 1916 rebellion and the history of all that. So when you join the British Army, you're under no illusions. You know, you're very much under no illusions of who you are and what you're joining. So it can send you different ways. You can send you to either be very much withdraw back into yourself, where you can sort of say, you know, I'm not really going to say who I am. Or it can completely send you the other way, where you're like, yeah, I'm who I am, and if you don't like it, you know, tough, you know, you're flying tricolours every 2 minutes.
Listen in. A very simple, easy parade. Concentrate what's going on.
Keep the mind working all the time. I know some of yous have taken some mind-numbing juice last night. That is not an excuse to go and start chewing gravel this morning. Because if your chin hits that square, mark my words, I will lift you up by the ears and frog march you up with a personal audience with the Duke himself. The Scots Guards amongst yous, today is St. Patrick's Day, in case yous haven't realised. I know yous are always drunk, but it's the only day here that the mix get drunk. Okay, boys? Who's suffering? Keep suffering. You go down, son. Stand by.
I mean, as a young lad in Dublin, St. Patrick's Day was nothing special. It was a day off school and we go into town and watch the parade. But after joining the Irish Guards, I mean, on my first 10 St. Patrick's Days, I had the Queen Mother come in and present me with shamrock. You can't say being in the British Armed Forces is against your Irishness. It's not. It's, if anything, I find it enhanced it. It made me realise who I was and where I came from.
It's quite funny, we are the Royal Irish Regiment. We wear the shamrock. And the guys from Northern Ireland have to adapt more to being seen as Irish than we do to be seen as British. They wear the shamrock and there's no red hand in the shamrock.
The reality is, I think, that when Irish recruits are required, the powers that be, the military masters, will use anything that makes the Irish recruit feel at home. And if you want shamrocks, if you want Irish Guards, if you want Irish Mastiffs, if you want bands, St. Patrick's Day parades, anything like that which might be frowned upon politically from certain quarters, would nonetheless be valued, played up and brought forward as an inducement to get recruits from wherever they could be found. In other words, they'll sing any song, they'll blow any trumpet as long as it produces recruits.
Soldiers from the south might be comforted by symbols of Irishness, but they can't for long escape the fact that they're in a foreign army, serving the British monarch.
If you ask me whether I was British or Irish, undoubtedly, I am Irish. You can be serving in the British Army and have very much Republican tendencies. I've met people, and they've got Heroes of 16 on the wall. People will put you in boxes and categories, but it ain't that simple.
Felt a bit peculiar to begin with. At first I didn't even sing it at all. More out of the fact that I didn't know the words than anything else. But at the end of the day, it's just a song. If you've made the sort of leap of going and joining the British Army and signing the oath of allegiance, it's no big thing just to sing a national anthem.
When I was younger and the English national anthem would come on, I wouldn't dream of standing up for it. And there I am standing proud as punch. I'm standing proud as punch because my wife is English, my kids are English, my family's being paid by the British government, and whilst I'm being paid and whilst I'm on parade, I am very patriotic to the fact that I am fighting for Queen of Country. But when I'm in my own time, you know, if the English national anthem came on, I wouldn't stand. I'd chill and relax. And not just in my own house, you know, in social events as well. But if the Irish national anthem came on, I would stand, and then I get the looks, you know, of, well, what is he? And all I simply am is an Irishman serving in the British Army.
160,000 people have already paid their respects to the Queen Mother as she lies in state. Thousands are standing patiently in the chilly evening air this evening, waiting their turn.
Left, right, left, right, left. Turn straight away. Good. Keep the step.
The Irish Guards prepare for one of the biggest ceremonial occasions London has seen. The Queen Mother requested that soldiers from the regiment carry her coffin. Among the bearer party are 2 soldiers from the Irish Republic.
Okay, think about the drills. Stay switched on at all time. You know it's a great honour and it's quite a privilege. We make sure that we do this correctly, okay? Right. What I want you to do now is start preparing your kit and I will look at it around 8 o'clock, okay? Happy? So, any questions for me? Right, away you go.
I always wanted to be a soldier, but I never expected to be on that level. Like, a young bloke from Tala joining the British Army, ended up carrying the Queen Mother's coffin. Never expected that. To be honest, I'm actually very proud. It's like an extra bonus to me. Like, it makes me feel outstanding, knowing that I've actually done something like this. I'll never forget it, like.
Basically, I'm doing those scrumming the bearskin into its proper shape, so it's nice and fluffy for the morning. I'll do it again in the morning before we go out, just to get it just right.
He's on it again. Yeah. You want to start timing these boys, I tell you, you want to watch yourself.
Really?
Aye,
Really, I will do. See you later on. And it says south of the border, so that's what they call us Mexicans, because we're south of the border.
But should men from south of the border be taking part in an event which celebrates the British monarchy?
It's nothing to do being the royal family. We were her battalion, you know what I mean? She loved us. And she wanted us to be the ones that laid it to rest. And I think that's the least we can do.
Coffin led by the Irish Guards. Guardsmen O'Neill, Hewitt, Wall, Fleming, Organ and Campbell. We have this difficult but proud job.
Irish recruitment to the British Army has, I think, been a rather hidden phenomenon. It's well known to the top brass within the military this was an important element within the British Army. But it has not generally been, I think, perceived by the Irish public that this is in fact going on. I think this is something which was known in localities and known amongst families, but not generally paid attention to within a wider public. I think it's an important element, though, within 20th century Ireland.
8 members of the Irish Guards.
Well, there he is there, look.
Looks the part, doesn't he?
Yeah.
All the
Tense moments there. Never thought when he joined 6 years ago that he would be involved in anything like that. You know, every camera, everybody watching it.
The whole world was watching him, and it was their son, you know. And all the family ringing up and saying, "We're watching him," you know what I mean? Looking at the telly and watching. Oh, look at him! He's great, isn't he?
Very emotional, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Did himself proud as well.
And he did all them proud.
Yeah.
And when he was very small, I came home from Lebanon. I was in my UN gear, and I put on the blue beret. It was his birthday, so I kind of knew he'd be a soldier.
Sometimes like he'd be doing an escort or something, and the bikes or the tanks or something would drive by the house on the main road, down the road from Tala. I'd say, yeah, my dad's probably in one of them. Like, and all the kids saying, yeah, your dad's a great job. My dad's only an electrician or something. I go, yeah, my dad's a soldier.
I kind of hoped he'd be a soldier, you know what I mean? And if it wasn't my army, it'd be someone else's army. He was going in to be a soldier, and that was it.
Well, I would have preferred him to be here rather than be away from home.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to be. It was Gavin's call.
Yeah, some people give you a stick about him being in the British Army, but I do tell the people, but there's people from Navan Road, Ballymun, Ballyfermot, everywhere.
In my unit.
In the unit. Once we beat them in the soccer, no mind.
When I was young, I had a twist for punching babies with me fist. And then I thought I would enlist and join the British Army. Out there, looking for monkeys in the zoo, and if I had a face like you, I'd join.
Not all Irish parents find it easy to accept a son who fights for Britain. 30 years of conflict in the north have hardened attitudes to British soldiers across Ireland. For many families, the peace process is irrelevant. The shock and stigma of discovering that their son is a Brit remains as strong as ever.
My mother went ballistic. My mother went absolutely ballistic.
It was shocked silence for the first few minutes. To be honest with you, I hadn't even unpacked my bags when I went home at that stage because I didn't know whether I'd be going straight back out the door with them.
Uncles and aunts who were in the Republican movement, quite staunch Republican family, and for years, in fact, still to this day, some of them still won't talk to me. But that's their choice.
I mean, I know fellas from the south like who've been disowned by their own family just for joining this man's army, and at the end of the day, it's a crime, it's a shame. You know, it should be something to be proud of.
I mean, there's a lot of people in Dublin think that Irish fellas, especially in the British Army, is wrong, but it's just another job at the end of the day, and a lot of people frown on it. Yeah, well, I'm a little bit nervous now because when we were filming in London, it's a big difference. It's a world away from Dublin. Now that I'm in Dublin, I'm a little bit self-conscious about where I am. Like, I just have to keep a low profile when I'm at home.
We beat the enemy with a fuss and leave the boys out in the dust. I know it ain't quite maybe us, the gallant British Army.
Evidence of Ireland's connection to the British Army also keeps a low profile. At the entrance to Stephen's Green, an arch commemorates Dubliners killed fighting for Britain in the early 1900s. When these Irishmen died, their patriotism was not in question. Their namesakes would become famous just a few years later, for entirely different reasons.
There's so many things you take for granted when you're at home. Once you go away, you start really appreciating your history all the more and appreciating the fact that you are a Southern Irishman in the British Army.
The 1st Battalion of the Royal Irish Regiment moves up for an attack during a training exercise. Modern weaponry has changed the battlefield, but in many ways the soldier's job remains the same today as 80 years ago, at the height of Irish involvement in the British Army. Almost 150,000 Irishmen, many of them nationalists, volunteered to fight in the killing fields of Belgium and the Dardanelles during the First World War. Their fate has until recently been little known in the country they left behind.
If you walk into any of the memorial parks in Dublin, you will see straight away the sacrifice that people from the south and the north have made for the British Empire under the flag of Britain. 49,000 Irishmen died in World War I. And bear in mind, that's what was going on at the time with the 1916 Rising. And there was a lot of anti-British feeling at the time. And there was no conscription. That is an amazing number of men to go away and give the ultimate sacrifice for what they believed in.
Big man! Fire support on call!
1916 was a watershed. As the Irish regiments were being decimated at the front, at home, other Irishmen began the fight for independence. The men in British khaki were suddenly on the wrong side of history.
Certainly one of the more poignant aspects, I think, to the modern eye is the spectacle of Irishmen on both sides of a given conflict. The Easter rebels were confronted by the Dublin Fusiliers, who had, by and large, home on leave, on rotation from the front. This is one of the tragedies of Irish history, that Irishmen should confront Irishmen on battlefields throughout the world.
As Republicans battled with British troops, there was understandably little chance that those who had served the Crown would be welcomed home with open arms. Some former British servicemen joined the rebels. Some were shot as spies. Most kept their heads down and were forgotten. When the treaty was signed and the Free State born, Ireland's relationship with the British Army seemed to have reached an abrupt end.
The official Irish view was quite simple, that Britain had just been kicked out of 26 counties, but that it was still an occupying force. Memories were still very raw as a result of the Tan War. In 1922, the recruitment stations were closed down. The 5 Southern Irish regiments were disbanded, and I suppose many people thought that was it.
But the fond farewell paid to the departing English soldiers showed that not everyone had been won over in the struggle for the Republic.
There was an unofficial view through the 1920s which really just paid no attention to this whatsoever. Certain military areas from which there had been a tradition of recruitment, certain families had given recruits to the army, and I think these families in these areas continue to do so, irrespective of what official Ireland's view was. I think they may even have gone along with singing the songs, they may have toasted the men of 1916, and then they may have just gone and joined the British Army.
And some traces of that culture remain. Tucked away on the quays in Dublin, ex-British servicemen have a social club. Here, an alternative view of Irish history is kept alive.
Easter week every year. In the old days, my grandmother, she hung the Union Jack out in the fines because she felt that the thing had been handled wrong. She always felt that it could have been handled differently and we wouldn't have had the situation that developed out of that. When the Queen got married, there was a great event in that area, which is the Liberties, the Dubliners of the Dubliners. There was a dealer called Katie Moore went around all the houses and made a collection for a present for Her Majesty the Queen. And everybody subscribed.
Less than 20 years after the fight for independence, working-class communities like this provided thousands of willing recruits for the British Army on the outbreak of the Second World War.
Well, I was just a young lad then, I suppose. Wasn't quite 17. And there was no work to be had. And we were standing around the corner, about a half dozen of us, and the war broke out, and we were saying, well, we would like to be in on it because there's quite a few First World War men lived in the area where we lived, and we used to hear stories from them. So we thought maybe we'd do likewise and go and join up. So we were going to win the war for the Brits, of course, but it didn't turn out that way.
You have to remember the economic situation at the time in Ireland. My hometown of Carrick was absolutely... they were going on the boats every day over to England, and they were working there, and a lot of them joined of their own free will, and some of them were called up. People going all of the time, people leaving, and some never coming back. Never coming back.
I wonder what the hell I was doing there. It's only when you get into action and you realise it when you saw your comrades being shot down and lying in the fields in Normandy, crying out for their mammies or their sweethearts or their wives. Then it sinks in that it's for real and you're part of it.
The most terrifying, I think, is the machine gun fire coming at you. You could feel the bloody bullets getting over your bloody heads. I didn't go in for any great heroics or that. I did what I had to do. You knew the objective was the hill at the top, and you also knew that that was where the bloody fire was coming from. We got to the top eventually. Those of us that were left got to the top, and just then I was hit.
During the war, more than 60,000 Southern Irishmen fought. More than came from loyal Ulster. Over 3,000 were killed. All of the men were volunteers.
We call it loiders, flying coffins, because we're only made of plywood, and when we crossed the Rhine, there was 32 to a loider, and 8 of us got away from that loider alive. The rest were dead. Now, how again I escaped, I'll never know. They were all Irishmen. and they laid down their lives for freedom, not for king and country, for freedom.
Irish Second World War veterans didn't return home as heroes. Officially, the war had passed their country by.
With the neutrality and all that, they just didn't want to know. They weren't hostile or anything. They just ignored it, I suppose, to a great extent.
Well, the funny thing, they weren't. They didn't talk about it because I didn't think I had done anything to be talking about. I was there and that was it.
Maybe indifference is too strong a word to use. They just weren't interested.
Due to falling membership, shortly after this social night, the British Legion Club in Dublin closed down. "60 years after the war, the hidden tradition continues.
I've one simple question to ask you now, and that is, do you want to join the army?
I do.
Right, well done. Now, to put you into the army, I'm going to ask you to take the oath of allegiance to join.
The stigma of joining up remains strong. The Troubles and economic prosperity have reduced the flow of Irish recruits, but there are still young men prepared to defy public opinion and take the Queen's shilling.
So without any further ado, I'll ask you to take the Bible in your left hand, raise your right hand, begin.
I swear by Almighty God
that I will be faithful,
that I will be faithful,
and bear true allegiance,
and bear true allegiance
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II,
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II,
her heirs and successors,
her heirs and successors,
and that I will, as in duty bound, honestly and faithfully defend Her Majesty, against all enemies, and will observe and obey, all orders of Her Majesty, her heirs and successors, and of the generals, and officers, set over me.
It's my career, my ambition in life to be a soldier.
Well done.
While I had my hand on the Bible, I was just thinking, like, Jesus, I'm doing this now. I'm really here. I'm British Army, Jesus, like, you know. I'm here now, so I am.
All we're going to do now is just try on various items of kit. Okay, you happy enough?
Soldiers from the Republic have to deal with the fact that many people at home view their decision to serve the Queen as a betrayal. Can you really be Irish in a British uniform?
There wasn't any worries in my own mind about joining the Foreign Army. Obviously, you're still going to get people at home that will look at me joining the British Army in a very bad light. But that, to me, didn't matter whatsoever. I was going to go off and do what I wanted. I knew I wanted to join the British Army. I knew I wanted to serve under the Union Jack.
No, I don't feel disloyal in any way. I don't feel ashamed about what I do. At the end of the day, it's soldiering, like, you know. It doesn't matter who you soldier for. I mean, if the Irish Army wanted me, they could have had me years ago, you know, and obviously it's their loss.
Do you want the honest truth? I joined up to fight for myself, to fight for a career, to fight for a life. I've served all around the world fighting for the Queen. That's because the Queen pays me. I'm still Irish.
You sign the oath of allegiance, and there is a big part you do swear loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen, the officers and non-commissioned officers she sets over you. So at the end of the day, if you think that when it comes to the crunch you can just sort of walk away from it, I don't think that's an option at all. I think that would be disloyal, far worse than my disloyalty of going abroad and joining the British Army. I think I've signed a contract, and while I've signed that contract, and while I'm serving that contract, I'll stick by it.
This is Ramble War Cemetery, as you see. In here is buried 50 Royal Ulster Rifles who were killed in the area of Columnbales, Caen and Honfleur.
Serving Irish soldiers visit war graves in Normandy, accompanied by men who served with the fallen. Irish regiments organised trips like this to keep the memory of those who died alive in the minds of today's soldiers. The Irishmen buried here joined up for many reasons: adventure, travel, a job.
Very young boys.
Well, that's the way.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Feeling of sadness. And the actual folly of so many youngsters dying at that age.
I'm actually quite annoyed that I've seen so many Irishmen in these graveyards today, and they haven't been properly respected and recognised back home. And there's families across there that have got people buried here, and they can't talk about it, and they can't let people know that their sons have died, you know, in some way bringing Europe to what it is now. And I think it's a great shame. I actually wonder if I die in a conflict, will my family be able to talk about what I've done? And I don't think they will be able to. I think it's a disgrace.
Dublin also holds its war graves. Behind the Phoenix Park is an unmarked military cemetery. Buried here are Irish soldiers who died before independence in 1922. It's one of the few places where the British military tradition in Ireland is still discreetly remembered.
Listen, a martial sound is heard. The sound of soldiers fife and drumming.
We get a lot of locals who may have lived here or they grew up here as children and they never even knew that the cemetery was here. The gates are always closed over and it kind of maybe gives the impression that the place is private and closed off, so a lot of people don't come in.
And feathers gay. The sounds and sights they're surely thrilling dazzle village youths today. What flock to take a Saxon shilling.
I do find it fascinating, for, like, if my family, if we went back, like on one side I would have had a grandfather who would have been in the British Army, and then the other side I would have had a grandfather who would have fought in 1916. And it's kind of, it's funny to think, attending the graves maybe of the guys that were on the other side to him. It's kind of sad as well to see why a lot of these guys would have been caught in a really tricky situation, you know.
I think that 20th century Irish history has yet to be written. What we have been provided with has been a very monochrome picture of Irish society. It's almost as if it's a picture as we would have liked it to have been had we had every opportunity to bring it about. But there's another area of, if you like, the hidden Ireland, which has got to be exposed because it made it, for many people, this was their Ireland, this was their life.
Hear you from your mountains go to feel the scourge of foreign fever, swear to serve the faithless foe that lose you from your land forever.
At the end of the day, I'm just abroad doing a job. People going about, you know, Irishmen dying for freedom and all that. That's a fair one, they did. But they died to give men like me the freedom to choose what to do.
Abandoned for that Saxon shilling.
Men have died on a battlefield, fighting for what they believe to be right. Men have died on the battlefield, fighting for the money. Essentially, the reason that I agreed to do this interview and take part in the programme was the fact that I think it's about time everybody started to realise what has been going on for centuries. There's been Irish men and women die for the crown. And I think it's just about time that people realise that.